Why are you guys looking at me like that? Let's review The Grudge. What the hell's going on? The Grudge stars Andrea Riseborough, John Cho, Lin Shaye, and is directed by Nicholas Pesce. What is up, guys? Exciting day. This is the first review for the year 2020. I always get a kick out of doing the very first review for 2020 because, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. And I get to make a brand new playlist. Every year I make a playlist for reviews for that year. So this is marking the beginning of a new playlist. Exciting. But I recently just dropped my most anticipated horror movies of 2020, and one of those movies was The Grudge. I literally just dropped that yesterday. And I was excited to see this movie because of the trailer. The trailer alone, it just had a very creepy vibe to it, and especially that image of Lin Shaye with her fingers chopped off. Some pretty creepy stuff, and you know, it was very promising. And I will say, the remake of The Grudge, or the adaptation, I guess, because the original Ju-on was an Asian film. But the one with Sarah Michelle Gellar, were there two of those movies? One or two of those movies. That just goes to show how invested in this franchise I am. I'm only like a casual Grudge fan. I don't even remember that much about this Sarah Michelle Gellar one. But the one thing that always stuck out in my mind was those evil kids and the evil girl in The Grudge. Hell, I get the Samara character mixed up with the Grudge characters. But going into this movie, it's pretty promising too, because Sam Raimi is behind it. He's a producer, so that doesn't really mean that much at all. That pretty much consists of him going in and saying, let's make it rated R and let's make it bloody. Can I get my check now? And then he leaves. That's probably his only involvement in the movie. But director Nicholas Pesce is another promising thing, because he directed a movie that I forgot that I reviewed actually a couple years ago called Eyes of My Mother. That is a very effective little horror film, if I may say so myself. So a couple of things put this movie in the right direction. I like Lin Shaye. Lin Shaye she's pretty much like a horror icon at this point, you know, with her work in the Insidious movies. But anyway, I digress. Let me get down to the brass tacks of this movie. First off, quick plot synopsis. The beginning of this movie actually is kind of a handoff from the previous incarnation of The Grudge to the new version of it. It opens up in Japan, in Tokyo. And this girl that was living there in Tokyo, she steps out of the house, and we know that the Grudge house is a house that you don't want to have any part of. And of course, she is tainted by the rage, the grudge. And I will say, this opening scene, not very effective at all. It felt like it was just there. There was no build up to the scare, because there's like a scare to let you know that, hey, the grudge has her and she's going to bring it back to the States. But an opening scene in a horror movie should grab the audience, not make the audience roll their eyes. And that's what this scene did. But anyway, the grudge is passed to this house in Pennsylvania. And so in the I don't want to say present day, because the present day of this movie is 2006. There are three timelines: 2004, 2005, and 2006. I'll get into that. But in 2006, there's this detective played by Andrea Riseborough, and she is assigned to this case, and she becomes really interested in it. And this is another major problem that I have with the movie, is that she goes into the house after hearing that the detective that she's working with would not set foot in the house. It is stated that this guy was adamant about not going in the house. And so what does she do? She goes into the house anyway. She's brand new to the case. So I would think a good detective would have talked, would have gotten that information from the other detectives. So that was stupid too. You see, I'm already getting into the cons. I don't want to do that. Now I'm going to start this review out with the cons, because it's a good way to let you know what the characters are all about in this movie. And the reason I say cons is because the structure of this movie, I think, should have been handled a little bit better. It takes place, like I said, in 2004, 5, and 6, which I don't know why they wouldn't put it in the present day. Maybe there's a reason behind that. I'm not sure. But anyway, the reason it's 2004, 5, and 6 is because in 2004, the girl that's coming from Japan ends up in 2004. Then there's another couple who are having a baby that are in 2005, and this is the couple with the husband's Jonathan Cho, and you see him in the trailer with the fingers coming out of his head like we've seen in the previous Grudge movies. And so then in 2006, which is supposedly the present day, you have this detective, and she's researching the case of what happened in 2004 and 5. Are you confused yet? For a January horror movie, we shouldn't have this much coming at us, right? I'm stressed already. So this movie spends a lot of the time plugging in those little plot elements, putting all the pieces together for these characters that are, let's face it, pretty paper thin. We don't really care about them as much as we should. And it's a bad problem too. You know, you don't want your characters to be so paper thin that you can't get behind them. But what I mean by the problems in the editing is that it bounces between these three timelines constantly throughout the movie. It doesn't start in 2004 for the first third of the movie and then 5 for the next third and then 6. No, it bounces constantly all over the place. And I see why they were doing that, because they were trying to set up their scares throughout. But ultimately, the scares weren't that great anyway. There are a lot of jump scares, cliche jump scares in this movie. And really the scares that work are when they show how the grudge happened to these couples, what the result of the grudge was. Those scares actually work because it was like an actual event. You know, it was real. It wasn't a ghost type of scare. And we all know the jump scare is like the textbook scare that we use for those ghost types of scares. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, I will say there are a couple things I did like about the movie. First off, it is a hard R. There is a lot of blood in this, and you can see that in the trailer with Lynn Shay and her fingers chopped off. But there's a lot of that in this movie. That's not the only scary scene in the movie. There are a few scenes that definitely did kind of crawl under my skin. And that is because it was graphic. You know, this is definitely not a PG-13 horror movie, and that's a good thing for me. Also, I did like the way this film looked. It kind of reminded me of what like David Fincher was doing in like Seven, you know, and Panic Room. It had really interesting cinematography. I guess the word I'm looking for here is potential. There was a lot of potential for this movie. Even like the way the very end of the movie was handled, there was a lot of potential. I actually liked it. I actually liked the very last like 10 minutes of this movie. I will give it that. And if there's gonna be something that you like about the movie, the last 10 minutes is a good thing. As I left this movie, I constantly kept thinking about possibilities, like this really could have been good. Unfortunately, there were some missteps throughout the movie. So ultimately, The Grudge gets a straight up humdrum. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. It was just okay. But anyway, we got the first review of 2020 in the can. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this movie. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays. We do Free for All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.